You might think this leaf is simply resting, but millions of cells are actively purging water pressure. As daylight fades, specialized light-detecting proteins called phytochromes signal the Maranta plant that night has arrived, triggering a complex biological cascade in the leaf joint. A mechanism Charles Darwin famously studied and documented, where potassium ions rapidly migrate out of the motor cells on one side of the pulvinous hinge, forcing water to follow the ions out, collapsing the cells and drawing the heavy leaf upward, just as the fading light signals your own pineal gland to begin the steady release of melatonin, preparing your nervous system to shut down its sensory gates. Much like the prayer plant closing its posture, while underneath the leaf, microscopic pores known as stomata slowly pinch shut to conserve moisture, halting the daytime process of transpiration, allowing the plant's biological breathing to drop to its absolute baseline. A protective shutdown remarkably similar to how your own core body temperature drops to initiate deep sleep. And as the Maranta folds perfectly vertical, it minimizes its surface area, protecting delicate cellular structures from cold and nocturnal herbivores. An evolutionary defense strategy mapped deep within its genetic code. While inside your skull, delta waves begin their slow, synchronized sweeps across the cortex, signaling profound rest. As research from the Journal of Plant Physiology demonstrates, this nocturnal movement is an active physiological process, proving that true rest, whether for a rainforest leaf or a human brain, is never merely passive. As the forest canopy plunges into deeper darkness, the Maranta plant's internal chemistry fundamentally shifts. Photosynthesis ceases entirely without photons, forcing the plant to transition purely into cellular respiration, consuming the starch reserves it painstakingly built during the day to survive the long night, mirroring how your own brain is now metabolizing its stored energy to fuel overnight repair. And while the plant's surface appears dormant, its internal vascular network is actively pulling water, maintaining the precise turgor pressure needed to keep these folded leaves locked in their defensive posture. Similarly, deep inside your skull, the glymphatic system is currently expanding its microscopic channels, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rhythmically wash through the neural tissue, clearing away metabolic byproducts, including adenosine, the very chemical that built up all day to make you feel exhausted. As the plant releases subtle, volatile organic compounds into the humid, undisturbed night air, an invisible chemical language that continuously interacts with the surrounding microbial life on the forest floor. Your own body is releasing an orchestrated cascade of growth hormones from the pituitary gland, directing cellular repair, rebuilding muscle fibers, and strengthening your immune system in the profound quiet. The deeper the Maranta settles into the dark, the more efficiently its mitochondria generate energy. Just as the slower your delta waves become, the more thoroughly your mind restores itself. Beneath the damp soil, the Maranta's root system engages in its own quiet, nocturnal rhythm, extracting oxygen from tiny air pockets in the earth to sustain cellular respiration in the dark. While symbiotic mycorrhizal fungi trade accumulated minerals for the plant's stored carbon. A silent, underground economy functioning perfectly while the leaves above remain tightly sealed. Much like your hippocampus is currently trading the short-term memories of today for long-term storage, transferring electrical data into the neocortex without requiring any conscious effort from you. Because the transpirational pull, the physical tension dragging water upward against gravity, has completely ceased, allowing the microscopic xylem vessels inside the stem to finally decompress and rest. Just as your cardiovascular system experiences a profound drop in blood pressure and heart rate, a necessary nocturnal dipping phase that relieves the mechanical stress on your arterial walls. And if a sudden sound echoes through the dense Amazonian canopy right now, the Maranta remains perfectly still, mechanically locked in its nyctinastic sleep posture, while your thalamus generates brief bursts of electrical activity known as sleep spindles, acting as a sensory gatekeeper, actively blocking that ambient noise from reaching your conscious awareness, ensuring that this delicate, restorative suspension continues entirely undisturbed until the arrival of morning light. As the forest reaches its thermal nadir, the absolute lowest temperature of the night cycle, the Maranta's endogenous circadian oscillators begin anticipating the Earth's rotation toward the Sun. Just as the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus detects the approaching biological morning, specialized photoreceptors in the leaf tissue register the very first wavelengths of pre-dawn light, signaling your own pineal gland to abruptly halt the synthesis of sleep-inducing melatonin. While deep inside the plant's pulvinus, biological ion pumps actively reverse their nocturnal direction, flooding the motor cells with potassium, causing a rapid influx of cellular water, which forcefully restores turgor pressure, acting as a hydraulic mechanism to unfold the leaf, and gradually lowering the Maranta's posture to maximize its surface area for morning photons, mirroring the cortisol awakening response initiated by your adrenal glands just before you wake. A sharp hormonal spike that elevates your blood pressure and mobilizes stored blood glucose, while the plant's stomata unlock, reopening their microscopic pores to resume transpirational gas exchange. As your brain transitions out of slow delta synchronization back into high-frequency waking beta waves, leaving both the rainforest ecology and your cellular architecture structurally repaired and chemically reset, ready to resume the complex metabolic demands of a newly synthesized daylight cycle. Yet, as this first 90-minute sleep cycle concludes, your brain does not immediately wake. Instead, it gently descends into a second, specialized phase of slow-wave architecture, much like the Maranta plant entering its deepest phase of nocturnal metabolic conservation, where cellular autophagy begins, a highly regulated biological process of internal housekeeping. Enzymes within the plant cells actively dismantle damaged proteins and degraded chloroplast components, recycling these raw molecular materials to maintain efficiency for the following day. A phenomenon plant biologists recognize as essential for long-term botanical survival and resilience, while simultaneously, your own neurons trigger an identical autophagic clearing mechanism during deep sleep, breaking down misfolded proteins that accumulated in your cortical synapses during waking hours. A targeted neurological pruning that prevents cellular stress and cognitive overload. And as the rainforest temperature stabilizes in the absolute middle of the night, the Maranta's root exudates gently alter the pH of the surrounding rhizosphere, cultivating beneficial microbial colonies that will protect the plant from soil-borne pathogens, mirroring how your deep sleep phase heavily regulates the production of adaptive cytokines. fortifying your immune system's precise ability to identify and neutralize inflammatory threats. And as the forest understory reaches its peak humidity in the dead of night, the Maranta plant begins synthesizing specialized plant hormones known to botanists as auxins, which actively redistribute through the cellular matrix of the stem and the folded leaf joints, facilitating nocturnal cell elongation and structural repair without the disruptive interference of solar radiation. A critical botanical growth phase that depends entirely on the absolute stillness of the dark, mirroring the precise moment your own pituitary gland releases its largest daily pulse of human growth hormone into your bloodstream during this deep, slow-wave sleep cycle, triggering a powerful anabolic state where your body actively rebuilds microtears in muscle fibers and increases bone mineral density, utilizing the raw amino acids gathered during the day, while the plant simultaneously reinforces its own cellulose walls to prepare for morning winds. Both biological systems engaged in a profound, synchronized act of nocturnal reconstruction, protected by the sensory gating of your thalamus and the plant's tightly folded geometry, ensuring that this delicate synthesis of proteins and hormones remains completely uninterrupted by the unpredictable stimuli of the waking world or the active rainforest canopy, allowing true, cellular-level restoration to proceed in the absolute quiet of the night. As the night progresses, the Maranta plant enters a state analogous to your own REM sleep. Though lacking a nervous system, the plant relies on a sophisticated network of calcium ion waves to process and encode the environmental stresses it encountered during the previous daylight hours. Botanists refer to this as somatic memory, where epigenetic markers on the plant's DNA are modified, recording the exact intensity of daytime heat or drought to optimize tomorrow's stomatal responses. Just as your brain, now entering rapid eye movement sleep, begins to process emotional memory, while the visual cortex and amygdala activate, your mind safely replays the day's most challenging stimuli, stripping away the acute stress chemicals like norepinephrine while preserving the core informational data. A strictly biological mechanism that allows both the rainforest flora and the human mind to adapt. The Maranta's cellular memory ensures it will close its leaves faster tomorrow if temperatures spike, while your REM sleep ensures your prefrontal cortex can navigate tomorrow's social complexities with recalibrated precision deep within the leaf tissue. These calcium spikes travel through the plasmodesmata, connecting every single cell, functioning as a decentralized processing unit that never truly shuts down, only shifts its operational mode. As the high-frequency beta waves of your REM cycle mirror this intense internal botanical calculation, proving that the darkest hours of the night are reserved for the most critical survival algorithms. As the rainforest air reaches its maximum dew point and microscopic water droplets begin to condense, the Maranta's tightly folded vertical posture suddenly reveals a secondary evolutionary defense mechanism. By drastically reducing its exposed horizontal surface area, the plant physically prevents heavy dew accumulation, which would otherwise create a perfect breeding ground for pathogenic fungal spores to germinate overnight, while tiny hydrophobic structures on the leaf cuticle, called trichomes, actively repel settling moisture, creating a highly engineered, impenetrable physical barrier against the chaotic biological threats of the dark. This botanical lockdown perfectly parallels a profound neurological safety protocol occurring right now in your brainstem. During the most vivid, emotionally intense periods of your rapid eye movement sleep cycle, a specialized cluster of neurons in your pons sends powerful inhibitory signals down your spinal cord, actively blocking motor neurons and inducing a state of temporary muscle paralysis known as REM atonia. This chemical blockade ensures your physical body remains completely anchored and safe in your bed, even as your motor cortex fires intensely, simulating running, fighting, or flying within your dreams. Without this precise neurological paralysis, you would physically act out the vivid narratives generated by your amygdala. Both the Maranta's structural lockdown and your own REM atonia serve the exact same biological purpose, enabling profound internal processing while completely neutralizing the risk of physical interaction with the external environment. As the REM cycle concludes, the intense beta wave activity in your brain begins to subside, allowing both the human mind and the Maranta plant to transition back into deeper conservation modes. Beneath the damp soil, the plant directs specialized starches down into its swollen rhizomatic storage roots, safely archiving the metabolic energy it painstakingly synthesized during the previous day's photosynthetic window, protecting its most critical biological resources deep underground, shielded from sudden environmental temperature fluctuations. This botanical archiving process directly mirrors the complex memory consolidation occurring inside your own hippocampus, where the chaotic, high-definition sensory inputs of your day are systematically stripped of their emotional volatility, and the core informational data is permanently encoded into the stable architecture of your neocortex, freeing up essential neural capacity in the hippocampus to absorb new experiences when you finally wake. Without this nightly data transfer, your cognitive networks would reach maximum capacity and fail to learn. Just as the Maranta would exhaust its daily energy reserves and fail to survive the season. Every slow oscillation sweeping across your cortex right now facilitates this massive, silent biological data migration. A coordinated rhythmic synchronization that requires the absolute physical stillness of the deep sleep state. While the plant's rigid, folded leaves ensure no mechanical disruption interrupts its own subterranean metabolic filing, proving that both ecosystems rely on profound isolation to permanently secure what they learned today. As the midnight hour anchors the rainforest into its most profound thermal stability, the dense overstory canopy acts as a biological blanket, trapping heavy moisture and regulating the microclimate below, preventing drastic temperature fluctuations that would otherwise disrupt the Maranta's precise nocturnal metabolic rate, and allowing the plant's internal cellular respiration to proceed with maximum thermodynamic efficiency. This precise environmental regulation perfectly mirrors the autonomic thermoregulation governed by your hypothalamus, which actively dilates peripheral blood vessels in your hands and feet to expel core body heat, forcing your internal temperature to drop by approximately 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit, a non-negotiable biological prerequisite for sustaining the slow, high-amplitude delta waves of deep sleep. Without this precise thermal downregulation, your cortical neurons would fire too rapidly, fragmenting the restorative architecture, just as the Maranta would be forced to reopen its stomata prematurely. losing critical water vapor to the night air. Instead, the plant's rigid, folded leaves create a localized boundary layer of still air right at the cuticle surface, an aerodynamic adaptation that severely restricts convective heat loss and locks in cellular moisture, while your own autonomic nervous system maintains an identical, highly controlled biological lockdown, ensuring that both the delicate botanical geometry and your neurochemical balance remain entirely undisturbed, anchored securely in the absolute lowest metabolic state required for profound cellular survival. As the deep night continues, the absence of ultraviolet solar radiation provides a crucial biological window, allowing the Maranta's cellular machinery to address the molecular damage sustained during daytime photosynthesis, where specialized enzymes within the plant's nucleus begin the meticulous process of DNA repair, seeking out and excising damaged nucleotides that were mutated by intense solar exposure. A highly energy-dependent mechanism that requires the absolute cessation of other metabolic demands. Similarly, deep within your cortex, the neurons that fired continuously throughout your waking hours have accumulated toxic double-strand breaks in their own DNA from high-frequency oxidative stress, and it is only during the synchronized, slow-wave delta rhythms of deep sleep that the chromosome dynamics within your individual neurons actively increase their physical movement, allowing specialized repair proteins to access and reconstruct the fractured genetic sequences. A vital neurological maintenance phase that prevents cellular senescence and cognitive decline, demonstrating that sleep is not merely a cessation of consciousness, but a structural imperative. Both the Maranta leaf and your cortical tissue require the profound isolation of the dark to secure the genetic integrity necessary to survive the radiation and metabolic stress of tomorrow. Locked in a silent, synchronized rhythm of molecular restoration beneath the forest canopy. As the final slow-wave cycles conclude, the Maranta's circadian clock anticipates the impending sunrise, initiating a pre-dawn photosynthetic priming phase long before the first actual photons strike the leaf, where specialized rubisco enzymes are actively assembled in the dark to prepare for carbon fixation, ensuring maximum metabolic efficiency the exact second solar radiation breaches the rainforest canopy. This anticipatory biological state perfectly mirrors the synaptic downscaling concluding in your own neocortex, where the chaotic, overlapping neural connections formed by yesterday's minor sensory inputs are actively weakened. A mechanism published in the journal Science as synaptic homeostasis, systematically removing accumulated neurological noise, preserving only the most critical, highly reinforced memory circuits forged during the previous waking day. This nocturnal pruning prevents the exhaustion of your brain's limited metabolic energy and physical space. Just as the plant recalibrates its cellular water pressure to brace for the morning heat, slowly reversing the ion pump gradients in the pulvinus to gently lower its defensive posture. Your own central nervous system prepares to transition out of its deep parasympathetic dominance. As core body temperature gradually begins to rise, signaling the approaching end of the sleep cycle, leaving both the botanical architecture and your neural pathways completely reset, optimized, and incredibly efficient, ready to absorb the immense sensory and metabolic load of a newly beginning daytime ecology. as the Maranta plant fully relinquishes its defensive vertical posture to the new light. The specialized motor cells in the pulvinus actively expel potassium ions back into the surrounding tissue, a highly controlled cellular deflation that allows the heavy, broad leaf to surrender entirely to gravity. This physical yielding perfectly mirrors the profound muscular release orchestrated by your parasympathetic nervous system, where your vagus nerve transmits powerful inhibitory signals directly to your major muscle groups, systematically dissolving any residual physical tension that your body unknowingly held onto during the previous day. As the leaves descend, they release the trapped boundary layer of humid, stagnant air, allowing fresh, oxygen-rich currents to circulate across the newly exposed epidermal surface. Just as your respiratory rate deepens and stabilizes, expelling accumulated carbon dioxide from your lower lung lobes, a critical biological exchange that resets your blood pH to its optimal, slightly alkaline state. Underneath the leaf, the guard cells rapidly swell with water, pulling the stomatal pores wide open, resuming the vital transpirational pull that will mechanically draw water upward from the deepest roots. Similarly, your brain's locus coeruleus slowly reintroduces trace amounts of norepinephrine, gently raising your baseline alertness without triggering the acute stress response of the amygdala. A masterful biochemical transition that ensures both the organism and the mind wake up secure, rather than alarmed, as morning photons strike the Maranta's leaves. Its phytochrome molecules undergo a rapid structural conversion, shifting from their inactive nighttime state back into the active biological form known as PFR, a molecular switch that firmly locks the plant's internal circadian clock to the external solar cycle. Similarly, as broad-spectrum daylight hits the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells in your eyes, a direct neural pathway transmits this luminous data straight to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, permanently halting melatonin production and setting the precise neurochemical timer for your next sleep cycle. Inside the plant, the chloroplasts immediately begin capturing solar energy to fuel the Calvin cycle, converting atmospheric carbon dioxide into the complex carbohydrates required for continuous botanical growth, while your own neocortex, now fully purged of yesterday's adenosine and metabolic waste, seamlessly shifts from the default mode network into highly efficient, task-positive cognitive states. Both biological systems have successfully survived the vulnerability of the dark through profound, highly structured rest. The Maranta unfolds its leaves not just to capture light, but as evidence of a completed cycle, just as your mind emerges from the depths of slow-wave sleep, chemically and structurally renewed, proving that yielding to the biological necessity of rest is the ultimate prerequisite for waking survival, ready to face the thermodynamic and cognitive demands of a completely new, brightly illuminated day. Yet even during the peak of daytime photosynthetic output, the biological necessity for rest inevitably returns. When solar radiation reaches its maximum zenith, the Maranta experiences a phenomenon known as midday depression, a temporary, localized closure of stomata designed to prevent catastrophic water loss through excessive transpiration. Because if the evaporative demand exceeds the root system's hydraulic capacity, the xylem vessels could rupture, creating lethal air bubbles known as embolisms, that permanently destroy the plant's internal water transport network. To prevent this structural failure, the plant initiates a micro-rest, briefly pausing its carbon fixation, perfectly mirroring the secondary 12-hour circadian dip programmed directly into your own human biology, typically occurring 7 to 8 hours after waking, when your core temperature undergoes a slight, transient drop, and a minor surge of extracellular adenosine momentarily suppresses your basal forebrain's arousal circuitry, creating the profound, heavy drowsiness of the mid-afternoon dip, often culturally formalized as a siesta. This is not a metabolic flaw, but a highly evolved mechanism to prevent synaptic overload, acting just like the Maranta's stomatal closure to guard against the depletion of critical internal resources, giving your hippocampus a brief, critical window to offload newly acquired data to the cortex, ensuring that neither the botanical hydraulic system nor your neurocognitive architecture collapses under peak operational stress, proving that even within the most active phases of life, structured rest remains a biological imperative. As the afternoon heat fades and the rainforest transitions back toward its nocturnal cycle, the Maranta's broad leaves prepare to fold once more, but their surfaces are not deserted. A microscopic ecosystem known as the phyllosphere microbiome thrives directly on the waxy cuticle, where millions of commensal bacteria form a protective biofilm across the epidermal ridges. Research published in Nature Microbiology reveals this bacterial layer is highly active in the dark, outcompeting invading fungal spores for the scarce nutrients dissolved in nighttime dew, acting as a decentralized, biological shield that defends the plant while its physical posture rests. This invisible botanical armor directly parallels the nocturnal behavior of your own skin microbiome. As your body enters sleep, the epidermal barrier actively lowers its pH level, creating an acidic environment that suppresses pathogenic bacterial growth while you remain completely unconscious. Simultaneously, your immune system redistributes specialized T cells directly to your cutaneous tissue, a process documented by dermatological science that requires the low cortisol environment of deep sleep, allowing these immune cells to methodically neutralize microabrasions and pathogens encountered during the day, ensuring that the protective boundary between your internal organs and the external world is fortified, proving that true biological rest involves mobilizing entire microscopic armies to defend the sleeping host. Deep within the midnight understory, the Maranta plant participates in an invisible chemical dialogue, releasing volatile organic compounds, specifically complex terpenes, into the heavy, stagnant night air. A nocturnal olfactory broadcast designed to warn neighboring plants of localized herbivore threats, allowing nearby foliage to proactively upregulate their own defensive toxic metabolites before morning. This decentralized botanical communication occurs entirely through the slow diffusion of airborne molecules, directly paralleling how your own olfactory bulb bypasses the thalamic sensory gate during sleep, sending environmental scent data straight into the memory encoding structures of your hippocampus. Research confirms that ambient odors present during your slow-wave sleep cycles can actively trigger targeted memory reactivation without ever pulling you out of deep rest, strengthening the specific neural pathways associated with whatever you learned while smelling that scent. proving that both the rainforest ecosystem and your sleeping brain remain highly receptive to subtle, invisible chemical signals drifting through the darkest hours of the night, processing critical survival data while completely maintaining the physical paralysis of restorative sleep. As the terrestrial biome shares its chemical memory across the damp forest floor, your internal neurological archive quietly solidifies its own structural integrity until dawn. As the nocturnal humidity peaks, the Maranta plant actively manages its internal fluid dynamics. While the leaf joints remain deflated, the central stem maintains strict hydrostatic tension, using specialized ion pumps to drive potassium into cellular vacuoles throughout the root system, forcing water to follow the osmotic gradient, ensuring the core biological structure remains fully hydrated. A precise hydraulic balancing act performed entirely in the dark, without the driving force of evaporation. This nocturnal fluid retention perfectly mirrors the physiological shifts occurring in your own renal system. As you enter slow-wave sleep, your pituitary gland secretes a surge of vasopressin, an antidiuretic hormone that signals your kidneys to dramatically decrease their water filtration rate, actively reabsorbing pure water back into your bloodstream while concentrating metabolic waste, preventing dehydration and ensuring your blood volume remains stable while you remain completely unconscious. Both the tropical plant and the sleeping human must aggressively conserve their internal aqueous environments, relying on microscopic ion channels and hormonal signals to lock moisture inside the cellular matrix, suspending the normal daytime flow of fluids to prioritize systemic repair and structural maintenance, allowing your cardiovascular system to rest without the mechanical stress of fluctuating blood pressure, anchoring both the rainforest ecology and your physical body in a state of perfect, hydrated equilibrium. As the midnight canopy settles, the Maranta addresses the invisible cellular friction accumulated during daylight hours. Intense solar radiation and fluctuating temperatures generate reactive oxygen species, toxic byproducts that damage plant tissue. In the absolute darkness, the plant synthesizes specialized antioxidant enzymes to systematically scavenge these free radicals, actively downregulating acute defensive pathways like jasmonic acid signaling to conserve vital metabolic energy. A strictly biological anti-inflammatory process that prevents microscopic structural damage from escalating into systemic failure. This nocturnal botanical pacification directly mirrors the profound immunological shift occurring within your own body. Waking hours inevitably accumulate microtears in your vascular endothelium and oxidative stress across your neural networks. But as you enter the sustained, synchronized delta waves of deep, slow-wave sleep, your central nervous system drastically reduces its sympathetic tone, fundamentally altering your inflammatory baseline, actively suppressing the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, shifting your biological budget away from emergency defense and entirely into baseline cellular repair, healing the endothelial walls of your blood vessels and stabilizing the microglial cells in your brain. Both the tropical foliage and the human body require this exact period of profound, uninterrupted stillness to fully resolve the microscopic damage inflicted by simply existing in an active, waking environment, restoring the organism to a state of profound, non-inflamed equilibrium before the sun rises again. as the inflammatory signals subside, the deepest metabolic work begins within the plant's microscopic powerhouses, the mitochondria, which now operate entirely independent of solar input to process stored carbohydrates, generating massive amounts of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, the universal biological energy currency. This nocturnal ATP production is strictly allocated to internal repair rather than active growth, allowing the Maranta to systematically replace degraded cellular machinery before the next photosynthetic cycle begins, precisely reflecting the immense energetic shift occurring within your own cerebral cortex right now. Though your brain represents a tiny fraction of your body mass, it consumes massive energy. And during the relentless firing of your waking hours, neuronal mitochondria accumulate significant structural damage. It is only during the profound, synchronized electrical quiet of slow-wave deep sleep that your neurons can divert their metabolic resources away from active electrical transmission, directing that raw cellular energy toward repairing their own mitochondrial DNA and membranes. A restorative biological imperative that prevents long-term neurodegeneration and chronic cognitive fatigue. Without this specific state of deep nocturnal suspension, both the rainforest plant and the human brain would face catastrophic energetic bankruptcy, completely unable to sustain the intense demands of daytime functioning, proving that the absolute stillness of the night is the ultimate engine of biological vitality. As the Maranta plant rests in the cool, saturated air of the midnight understory, its cellular machinery turns its attention to the microscopic boundaries of life itself. Daytime heat and solar radiation cause severe lipid peroxidation in the plant's cellular membranes, a form of oxidative degradation that physically compromises the structural integrity of the lipid bilayer. In the absolute darkness, the plant's endoplasmic reticulum synthesizes fresh, undamaged lipid molecules, methodically patching these microscopic breaches to restore the membrane's vital semi-permeable protective function. A structural reinforcement that directly mirrors the lipid maintenance occurring inside your own brain, where specialized glial cells, called oligodendrocytes, become highly active during slow-wave deep sleep, working tirelessly to repair and thicken the myelin sheath surrounding your delicate neural axons. This myelin is a dense lipid layer that effectively insulates the electrical cables of your nervous system, preventing signal leakage and ensuring rapid action potential propagation across your vast cognitive networks. Without this nocturnal lipid synthesis, both the plant's cellular defense and your neurological processing speed would gradually suffer catastrophic degradation, leading directly to systemic, physical, and cognitive exhaustion, proving that the ultimate biological priority of the night is always the active preservation of boundaries, securing the structural limits that allow complex biological life to function efficiently when the sun returns. Beneath the forest floor, the Maranta's root system executes a highly selective process of molecular filtration, where a waterproof cellular boundary, known as the Casparian strip, actively screens every drop of incoming groundwater, acting as a strict biological checkpoint that completely blocks toxic heavy metals and harmful soil pathogens, while permitting only pure water molecules and essential micronutrients to enter the central vascular cylinder, a continuous, highly regulated purification system that protects the plant's internal fluid dynamics from environmental contamination. This botanical checkpoint perfectly mirrors the precise, selectively permeable architecture of your own blood-brain barrier, where specialized endothelial cells and astrocytic end feet form a microscopic fortress around your cerebral blood vessels. During slow-wave sleep, this neurological barrier actively calibrates its permeability to support the glymphatic wash, preventing circulating neurotoxins and inflammatory pathogens from crossing into your delicate cortical tissue, while actively transporting the glucose and essential amino acids required for overnight synaptic repair, ensuring that the cerebrospinal fluid washing through your brain remains chemically pristine. Just as the Maranta ensures the absolute chemical purity of the sap resting within its xylem vessels, both the botanical and human biological systems dedicating their darkest hours to the uncompromising defense of their most vital internal environments against the invisible chemical chaos of the outside world, allowing profound restoration to occur behind an impenetrable, highly intelligent microscopic wall. As the deep sleep cycles continue, the Maranta initiates a critical phase of structural reinforcement, focusing metabolic energy on the rigid vascular stems that support its heavy, folded leaves, where specialized enzymes catalyze the polymerization of lignin within the secondary cell walls, a complex biochemical hardening process that permanently cements the cellulose fibers together in the dark, ensuring the xylem vessels can withstand the massive hydraulic tension of tomorrow's transpirational pull. This nocturnal botanical fortification perfectly mirrors the active skeletal remodeling occurring inside your own body, where the mechanical stress of waking movement has left microscopic fractures across your bone matrix. During slow-wave sleep, your parathyroid hormone carefully regulates the precise balance of blood calcium, allowing specialized osteoblast cells to deposit fresh calcium and phosphate directly into the skeletal microfissures, crystallizing into dense hydroxyapatite to structurally reinforce your bones while you remain entirely motionless. A highly coordinated biomineralization process that strictly requires the absence of active mechanical loading, meaning your skeleton can only truly rebuild its load-bearing capacity when gravity is fully surrendered. Just as the Maranta relies on the windless, humid night to solidify its own vascular scaffolding, both organisms utilizing the profound physical isolation of sleep to harden their internal architecture, guaranteeing the structural integrity required to bear the immense physical weights of the coming day. Even in the dense understory, the Maranta endures microscopic physical damage from daytime winds and passing insects. And during the absolute physical stillness of the night, its cellular machinery initiates targeted wound healing, where specialized enzymes rapidly synthesize a complex polysaccharide called callose directly at the site of injury, depositing this biological sealant over microscopic abrasions to instantly halt the leakage of internal cellular fluids, and actively plugging the plasmode's matter channels to prevent opportunistic pathogens from invading the compromised epidermal tissue. A highly precise botanical triage that permanently reinforces the structural integrity of the damaged leaf matrix. This nocturnal callose deposition perfectly mirrors the soft tissue repair orchestrated by your own human biology, where daytime mechanical loading creates thousands of microscopic tears across your skeletal muscles and connective ligaments. During the profound motor paralysis of slow-wave sleep, specialized cells called fibroblasts migrate to these exact trauma sites, secreting dense layers of collagen proteins to meticulously weave the fractured muscle fibers back together. An intense, localized anabolic synthesis that absolutely requires the complete cessation of voluntary physical movement, ensuring that the delicate, newly formed collagen crosslinks are not immediately torn apart by waking activity. Just as the Maranta plant requires the windless humidity of the night to cure its callous seals, both biological systems actively utilizing the prolonged paralysis of sleep to perform their most critical physical mending, guaranteeing that the organism wakes up structurally stronger and more resilient than it was the day before. Beyond physical repair, the absolute stillness of the night facilitates a profound electrical recalibration. At the microscopic boundary of every Maranta cell, an intense bioelectric maintenance is underway. Specialized proton pumps actively push hydrogen ions across the plasma membrane into the extracellular space, generating a steep electrochemical gradient that strictly polarizes the botanical cellular barrier in the dark, an invisible tension that requires continuous energy, even when the plant appears entirely dormant. This botanical voltage regulation directly parallels the immense electrical resetting occurring across your neural networks, where your billions of neurons rely on sodium-potassium pumps to restore their critical resting potential. During the waking day, constant action potentials flooded your neural membranes with sodium ions. Now, in the electrical quiet of slow-wave sleep, the pumps actively eject 3 sodium ions, while pulling 2 potassium ions back inside, consuming massive amounts of adenosine triphosphate to systematically re-establish the baseline negative 70 millivolt charge required for tomorrow's cognitive firing. If this electrical polarization were interrupted, your neurons would experience catastrophic depolarization and excitotoxicity, just as the Maranta's cellular walls would lose the osmotic potential necessary for nutrient transport. Both systems utilize the prolonged sensory deprivation of the night to firmly reset their batteries, ensuring every microscopic battery is fully charged before the chaotic sensory demands of morning return. As the midnight stillness deepens, the Maranta plant is engaged in an invisible, highly precise mathematical calculation. It is not merely resting. It is actively measuring the exact, uninterrupted duration of the environmental darkness, utilizing the slow, steady thermal reversion of its phytochrome proteins from their active daytime structural state. This controlled molecular decay acts as an incredibly precise biological hourglass, physically counting the hours of night, a phenomenon known as photoperiodism, allowing the plant to accurately track seasonal shifts in the Earth's orbit. If even a brief flash of external light interrupts this phase, the entire botanical timer instantly resets, meaning absolute, unbroken darkness is fiercely required to schedule its future flowering and long-term metabolic cycles. This precise nocturnal measurement perfectly mirrors the seasonal chronobiology executed by your own pineal gland, which does not merely initiate sleep, but actively uses the total uninterrupted duration of your melatonin secretion to provide your central nervous system with an exact chemical calendar of the current solar year, adjusting your baseline metabolic rate, immune thresholds, and seasonal affective resilience strictly based on the night's length. When artificial light fractures your sleep architecture, it artificially truncates this critical endocrine timing signal, tricking your biological calendar into registering a false, perpetual summer that exhausts your systemic immune reserves. Both the rainforest ecology and your human neurochemistry aggressively demand continuous, unpolluted dark to read the Earth's orbit, proving that the complete absence of light is never an empty void, but highly structured biological data. Deep within the midnight understory, the Maranta initiates a massive logistical relocation of its energy reserves, shifting away from daytime sugar production and focusing entirely on active phloem loading in the dark, where specialized companion cells actively pump highly concentrated sucrose out of the leaf tissue, forcing these dense sugar molecules down through the vascular phloem tubes toward the subterranean root sinks. A critical nocturnal evacuation that prevents toxic carbohydrate buildup from paralyzing tomorrow's photosynthetic capacity. Similarly, as you sink deeper into slow-wave sleep, your brain undergoes a profound metabolic fuel transition, methodically shifting its primary energetic dependency away from the high-octane glucose of your waking hours, and beginning to actively metabolize ketone bodies and lactate synthesized by your liver and astrocytes. This alternate nocturnal fuel source produces significantly fewer reactive oxygen species during cellular combustion, acting as a highly efficient, clean-burning energy supply that actively protects your fragile neural membranes, preventing the oxidative neurotoxicity that would inevitably occur if your cortex ran exclusively on glucose. Both the Maranta leaf and your cerebral cortex demand this exact, biochemically distinct nighttime rest, to safely offload metabolic byproducts and switch to alternative survival fuels until the sun rises, proving that biological sleep is a highly calculated logistical operation, managing supply chains in the dark, securing the absolute internal stability required to handle the massive energetic demands of waking life. As the deep night persists, the Maranta actively initiates a massive downregulation of its light-gathering antennae, because continuous daytime solar bombardment causes severe photoinhibition, degrading the critical D1 proteins inside photosystem 2. The absolute darkness provides the essential thermodynamic pause required to dismantle and rebuild these overloaded photosynthetic receptors, restoring their molecular sensitivity so the plant can accurately process incoming photons when dawn finally breaks. This botanical receptor reset perfectly mirrors the neurochemical calibration occurring within your own brain striatum right now, where continuous daytime sensory stimulation and cognitive effort constantly flooded your neural pathways with dopamine, forcing your dopamine receptors to downregulate and become physically desensitized to prevent severe neurotoxic overstimulation. During the profound neurological silence of slow-wave sleep, your brain clears this lingering extracellular dopamine, allowing the striatal neurons to actively upregulate their receptor density and completely restore their chemical sensitivity. Without this nocturnal reset, you would wake up experiencing profound anhedonia and severely blunted motivational drive, just as the Maranta would suffer catastrophic photosynthetic failure if forced to endure perpetual, uninterrupted daylight, proving that the biological capacity to absorb energy or experience reward relies entirely on enforced deprivation. Both the tropical leaf and the human mind structurally demand the quiet emptiness of the dark, to meticulously rebuild the highly delicate receptor thresholds that make waking interaction with the world possible, anchored in the deepest sleep phase. carefully resetting the biological instruments of perception and motivation. As the canopy rests, the Maranta's most complex biological transactions are occurring deep beneath the damp soil, where its root system interfaces directly with a vast subterranean mycorrhizal fungal network, actively allocating precisely measured doses of its stored carbon and sugars into the fungal hyphae. An exact biological payment traded in the dark for critical soil minerals like phosphorus and nitrogen. A highly localized, intelligent distribution of metabolic resources executed entirely while the upper foliage sleeps. This targeted underground allocation perfectly mirrors how your sleeping brain selectively distributes its own glucose, diverting vital energy away from the resting motor cortex and deactivated sensory processing centers, and aggressively funneling those carbohydrates straight into the hippocampus and targeted regions of the neocortex, fueling the massive, localized metabolic demands required to solidify new memories and update spatial mapping, while the rest of your body experiences profound paralysis. These specific neurological zones are burning energy at daytime levels. Both the plant's root system and your cognitive network function as highly intelligent biological economies, investing strictly limited resources entirely into the specific structures required for long-term survival. Without this targeted nocturnal carbon exchange, the Maranta would face severe mineral deficiencies and fail to thrive. Just as your mind would fail to encode the vital experiences, skills, and emotional data acquired during the day, proving that the profound stillness of sleep is actually a period of intense, highly localized biological investment. As the deep night presses on, a critical internal housekeeping protocol activates within the plant's cellular matrix, where large, fluid-filled organelles, known as vacuoles, initiate a process of microscopic recycling called autophagy, systematically engulfing and digesting damaged chloroplasts and misfolded proteins that accumulated during the day's intense heat, breaking these dysfunctional components down into their basic amino acids to be seamlessly rebuilt into healthy tissue tomorrow. This nocturnal cellular cleansing perfectly mirrors the macroscopic fluid dynamics of your brain's glymphatic system, where, during the deepest phases of slow-wave sleep, your glial cells physically shrink by up to 60%, drastically expanding the interstitial space between your neurons and allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush through the cortical tissue, acting as a powerful biological pressure washer that flushes out neurotoxic waste products, specifically clearing amyloid beta and tau proteins, the exact metabolic byproducts linked to neurodegenerative decline. Without this pressurized nocturnal wash, these sticky proteins would rapidly aggregate into lethal plaques, just as the Maranta would slowly suffocate from the internal buildup of its own degraded cellular machinery. Both the botanical vacuole and your human glymphatic network rely entirely on the mechanical stillness of the resting state to safely process and eliminate the toxic friction generated simply by being alive and conscious, securing the long-term viability of the organism by clearing the slate for another demanding cycle of existence, proving that survival is not just about what you can build in the light, but what you can successfully dismantle in the dark, while daylight provides the energetic currency. The actual physical expansion of biological life occurs overwhelmingly in the dark, inside the Maranta's stem, A critical phytohormone, known as auxin, begins to redistribute away from the dormant leaves, concentrating in the cellular elongation zones, where it actively lowers the pH of the cell wall matrix. This localized acidity activates expansin proteins, which systematically untangle the rigid cellulose microfibrils, allowing the cells to stretch and permanently expand as internal water pressure pushes outward against the weakened walls, proving that the plant literally grows taller and broader while locked in its nocturnal defensive posture. This precise hormonal trigger perfectly mirrors the massive surge of somatotropin, or human growth hormone, in your own body, released by your pituitary gland exclusively during the high-amplitude delta waves of your deepest sleep cycle. This nocturnal hormone cascade floods your bloodstream, signaling your liver to produce insulin-like growth factor 1, which aggressively stimulates the uptake of amino acids into your muscle tissue and skeletal matrix, driving the physical synthesis of new proteins and the division of chondrocytes in your joints. If this specific sleep architecture is fragmented, your pituitary gland suppresses this crucial hormonal burst, severely stunting tissue regeneration, accelerating physical aging, and leaving your muscles starved of raw building materials. Just as the Maranta would fail to produce new foliage without its dedicated auxin cycles in the dark, demonstrating that profound sleep is not a passive pause, but the primary biological engine of physical growth. As the night deepens, the Maranta anticipates the severe osmotic stress of tomorrow's blazing sun, actively synthesizing heavily concentrated compatible solutes, particularly the amino acid proline, within its vacuoles. This nocturnal chemical stockpiling significantly lowers the cell's osmotic potential without disrupting internal enzymatic functions, creating a protective hydration shell that actively prevents vital cellular proteins from denaturing and collapsing. A biochemical insurance policy, meticulously assembled under the safety of the dark canopy. This profound molecular quality control precisely mirrors the unfolded protein response occurring inside your own cells. Throughout the waking day, metabolic friction and oxidative stress cause proteins within your endoplasmic reticulum to misfold. If left unchecked, this toxic accumulation triggers cellular apoptosis, an irreversible programmed cell death. But during the prolonged metabolic pause of slow-wave sleep, your cells deploy specialized chaperone proteins, which physically interact with the malformed structures, meticulously refolding them into their correct, functional geometries, or aggressively targeting the irreparably damaged proteins for immediate enzymatic degradation and removal. A critical biological triage that prevents toxic intracellular buildup and catastrophic tissue failure. Without this nocturnal stabilization, both the Maranta and your human tissues would rapidly degrade under the friction of daily stress, proving that sleep is an active, biochemically expensive process of relentless structural quality control, ensuring the organism's deepest molecular architecture remains entirely unbroken for the dawn of a new day. Beneath the tranquil surface of the midnight canopy, an invisible, relentless pathogenic war is being waged. As microscopic viral vectors attempt to hijack the Maranta's cellular machinery in the dark, the plant initiates a highly targeted defensive protocol known as RNA interference, deploying specialized small RNA molecules to seek out and systematically slice the invading viral genomes. This is not merely a reactive defense, but an active updating of the plant's genetic memory, encoding the specific viral signature into its cellular archive to permanently neutralize future infections. This nocturnal biological programming perfectly mirrors the consolidation of immunological memory within your own lymphatic system. During the critical, low cortisol environment of deep, slow-wave sleep, your antigen-presenting cells are finally able to safely transfer critical pathogenic data directly to your T cells, forming microscopic immunological synapses that process the exact chemical signatures of the threats you encountered today. While deep within your bone marrow, naive B cells actively differentiate into long-lived memory cells, a vital transfer of survival data that is severely suppressed by the high-stress hormones of waking life. Without the profound neuroendocrine shift of sleep, your immune system would suffer catastrophic amnesia, leaving both the rainforest ecology and your physical body entirely defenseless against repeated viral mutations, proving that the darkest hours are explicitly reserved for updating the biological databases of survival. As the final hours of darkness wane, a profound biochemical shift ripples through the rainforest understory. The Maranta's internal circadian clock preemptively anticipates the impending solar radiation, triggering the transcription of daytime enzymes and slightly increasing cellular respiration to generate internal heat. A calculated thermodynamic warm-up that prevents metabolic shock when the first photons finally strike the canopy. This anticipatory botanical priming perfectly mirrors the cortisol awakening response currently activating in your own body, where your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis begins a slow, systemic release of glucocorticoids, gradually shifting your autonomic nervous system back towards sympathetic dominance, causing your peripheral blood vessels to subtly constrict and raising your core body temperature from its nocturnal baseline. An essential neuroendocrine cascade that actively mobilizes stored glucose into your bloodstream. Without this precisely timed cortisol spike, you would wake into a state of profound physiological inertia and cognitive fog, just as the Maranta would be unable to immediately capitalize on the morning's vital photosynthetic window. Deep within the leaf hinges, potassium ions begin to migrate back into the motor cells of the pulvinus, building the immense turgor pressure required to physically unfold the heavy leaves against gravity. Both biological systems transforming their profound state of rest into a highly pressurized state of kinetic readiness, standing at the absolute threshold of waking consciousness, flawlessly prepared for the chaotic demands of a new day. The exact moment of transition arrives as the Earth's rotation brings the rainforest canopy back into direct alignment with the sun. As the first high-energy photons strike the Maranta's epidermis, its phytochrome network instantly registers the solar frequency, triggering a massive, instantaneous hydraulic release within the pulvinus at the base of every leaf. Water aggressively floods into the extensor cells, mechanically forcing the heavy, folded leaves to uncouple and descend. A synchronized botanical awakening that explicitly maximizes its horizontal surface area to capture the new light. Simultaneously, a high-frequency surge of electrical activity violently sweeps across your own cerebral cortex, as the slow, synchronized delta waves of deep sleep are instantly shattered by chaotic beta waves. signaling the absolute return of waking consciousness, spatial awareness, and immediate sensory processing. Beneath the leaf, millions of microscopic stomatal pores snap open, eagerly inhaling atmospheric carbon dioxide, while the newly repaired chloroplasts ignite, instantly converting solar radiation into biological fuel. Your own biological engines roar to life, consuming the clean glucose safely stockpiled within your cortex overnight, shedding the protective nocturnal paralysis to fully re-engage with the thermodynamic friction of the waking world. Both the tropical understory and the human mind emerge from the dark fundamentally transformed, not merely rested, but biochemically reconstructed, structurally reinforced, and immunologically updated, ready to face the relentless demands of the sun, entirely because they first surrendered to the dark. As the Earth continues its axial rotation, plunging half the globe into light and the other into shadow, this relentless diurnal rhythm governs the macroscopic equilibrium of the entire planetary biosphere, where biological life is fundamentally defined not by a continuous, exhaustive expenditure of energy, but by a precise, non-negotiable oscillation between active physical expansion and profound internal consolidation. The Maranta Lucanura stands as a masterful botanical testament to this absolute biological law, proving that vulnerability, motor paralysis, and total darkness are not flaws in the evolutionary design, but rather the highly engineered, mandatory conditions required to sustain long-term systemic survival. Yet, in our relentless modern pursuit of perpetual illumination and endless cognitive output, we systematically fracture this ancient neuroarchitectural rhythm, chronically triggering our sympathetic stress pathways, stripping our cellular machinery of the absolute stillness required to heal, filter, and chemically rebuild. The consequences of this circadian rebellion are etched deeply into both human pathology and ecological distress. To observe the sleeping rainforest is to recognize the supreme intelligence of biological surrender, a surrender that actively secures the thermodynamic capacity to thrive under the brutal demands of the sun. There is no waking vitality without the strict, unyielding discipline of the dark. For both the tropical canopy and the human mind, the foundation of all waking life is forged in sleep, beyond immediate physical repair. This relentless diurnal cycle dictates the very future of the species. Within the deepest recesses of the Maranta's cellular nucleus, a profound epigenetic programming takes place. As the plant rests, it actively modifies the expression of its DNA through biochemical tagging, attaching methyl groups to specific genetic sequences to encode the environmental stress experienced that day, ensuring that newly developing leaves and even future generations are born pre-adapted to the prevailing microclimate. This botanical legacy directly parallels the profound epigenetic maintenance orchestrated during your own slow-wave sleep, where the absolute cessation of waking stress allows your cells to properly regulate histone modifications, silencing dangerous, pro-inflammatory genes while actively promoting the expression of longevity and repair sequences. Research confirms that chronic sleep fragmentation rapidly accelerates biological aging at the cellular level, stripping away these protective epigenetic tags and leaving your DNA vulnerable to catastrophic transcription errors. just as a rainforest canopy would slowly collapse if it lost the ability to genetically remember the dry season. Both biological systems rely on the quiet isolation of the dark to write the manuals of their future survival, transforming the transient experiences of a single day into permanent, transgenerational resilience. A silent, microscopic library continuously updated within the deepest architecture of the living cell, proving that true biological longevity is not achieved by endless endurance, but by masterfully scheduled rest. Deep within the actively dividing meristematic tissues of the Maranta, a profound defense against biological time is underway. At the very ends of its genetic blueprints lie the telomeres, protective caps that safeguard the structural integrity of the chromosomes. Daytime UV radiation and rapid cell division cause these vital biological shoelaces to incrementally fray and shorten. But during the metabolic quiet of the night, the plant upregulates an extraordinary enzyme called telomerase, actively rebuilding these chromosomal caps in the dark to prevent irreversible DNA degradation and cellular senescence. This botanical anti-aging mechanism directly mirrors the chromosomal maintenance occurring inside your own stem cells, where the restorative phases of deep, slow-wave sleep trigger a profound surge in human telomerase activity, protecting the genetic blueprint of your immune cells and fundamentally preventing premature biological aging. When sleep is chronically restricted, this delicate enzymatic repair process is severely suppressed, accelerating the shortening of your telomeres, directly linking a lack of profound rest to a drastically reduced lifespan. Both the ancient rainforest and the human body share this uncompromising genetic vulnerability, relying entirely on the profound stillness of the dark to physically rewind the cellular biological clock, ensuring that the fundamental code of life remains perfectly intact for the next cycle of cellular replication. A masterful feat of microscopic engineering, performed exclusively in the protective shadows of the night, proving that true endurance is written not in perpetual motion, but at the very ends of our resting chromosomes. Beyond physical repair and genetic preservation, the darkness facilitates a vital chemical purge. Throughout the day, the Maranta unavoidably absorbs environmental toxins and heavy metals from the surrounding soil. In the metabolic quiet of the night, it synthesizes vast quantities of glutathione, a master antioxidant that actively binds to these toxic intruders, neutralizing their destructive electrical charges and safely sequestering them deep within the cellular vacuoles, far from the delicate photosynthetic machinery. This nocturnal redox homeostasis mirrors the immense detoxification protocol occurring within your own liver, where, during slow-wave sleep, hepatic glutathione production reaches its absolute biological peak, scavenging the volatile free radicals and chemical byproducts generated by daytime digestion and stress, systematically binding to heavy metals and systemic pollutants to render them water-soluble for morning excretion. Without the prolonged parasympathetic dominance of sleep, your liver's glutathione reserves rapidly deplete, allowing oxidative stress to compound, destroying cell membranes and severely compromising your immune threshold. Just as the tropical plant would wither from the inside out if unable to flush its daily chemical burden, both systems rely on the sensory deprivation of the night to execute this highly expensive metabolic wash. ensuring that the internal environment remains chemically pristine and perfectly balanced, proving that survival fundamentally requires not just the intake of energy, but the masterful clearance of its toxic ash. As the deep rest continues, the organism must also make ruthless calculations about its own structural future. Older, shaded leaves of the Maranta that no longer produce sufficient energy are targeted for systematic dismantling. In the dark, the plant actively strips these dying tissues of vital mobile nutrients, like magnesium and nitrogen, redirecting these precious biological resources straight into the actively dividing apical meristems, a highly calculated botanical pruning that sacrifices the obsolete to ensure the survival of new growth. This ruthless nocturnal reallocation perfectly mirrors the profound synaptic pruning occurring within your own cerebral cortex, where, during the slow wave and REM cycles, your brain actively evaluates the millions of neural connections formed that day, deploying specialized microglial cells to act as microscopic gardeners within your gray matter, physically dissolving and eliminating the weak, redundant synapses that clutter your cognitive architecture, while aggressively strengthening the vital neural pathways associated with essential survival data and core memories. Without this active, nightly process of biological forgetting, your neural network would quickly become paralyzed by metabolic noise, overwhelmed by useless sensory data, rendering you incapable of learning, focusing, or forming clear decisions. Both the Maranta's foliage and your human cognitive map require the silence of sleep to actively shed the unnecessary, refining their internal networks into highly optimized, energy-efficient engines of perception, proving that true biological intelligence is defined just as much by what is erased as by what is remembered. As the physiological pruning concludes, the Maranta engages in a profound cross-species dialogue beneath the soil. Secreting highly specific chemical, exudates sugars and organic acids into the surrounding rhizosphere, to actively feed and cultivate a specialized army of symbiotic rhizobacteria in the dark. In exchange, these nocturnal microbes synthesize potent antibiotics to shield the vulnerable root tips from soil-borne pathogens. A brilliant ecological outsourcing of immune defense that occurs entirely while the host plant sleeps. This subterranean microbial alliance perfectly mirrors the nocturnal synchronization of your own gut microbiome, where, during the fasting period of sleep, your intestinal bacteria undergo a massive metabolic shift, fermenting complex dietary polysaccharides to produce vital short-chain fatty acids, primarily butyrate. These microscopic fatty acids cross the intestinal barrier and enter your resting circulatory system, acting as powerful epigenetic signaling molecules that actively suppress systemic inflammation, and seamlessly traversing the blood-brain barrier to physically strengthen the integrity of your deep sleep architecture, demonstrating that the circadian rhythm is not just a human or botanical phenomenon, but a multi-species consensus, where trillions of independent bacterial organisms completely align their metabolic clocks with the host's resting state, ensuring that the host wakes up chemically fortified, immunologically defended, and neurologically calm, proving that in both the damp rainforest soil and the human gut, we never truly sleep alone. Beyond the chemical alliances of the microbiome, the deepest foundations of the Maranta conceal a pristine biological sanctuary. At the very tip of each growing root lies the quiescent center, an ultra-protected reservoir of undifferentiated stem cells. These master cells are deliberately isolated from daytime metabolic stress, shielded from the oxidative damage of active growth. Only under the absolute thermodynamic safety of the night do they slowly divide, replacing the damaged armor of the root cap, guaranteeing the plant's ability to push deeper into hostile soil without exhausting its fundamental genetic blueprint. This subterranean preservation of pristine life perfectly mirrors the fragile process of neurogenesis within your own brain, where, deep within the subgranular zone of your hippocampus, new neural stem cells wait in a similar state of quiet suspension. During the restorative phases of slow-wave sleep, your brain secretes massive amounts of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a powerful biological fertilizer that prompts these stem cells to divide, migrate, and integrate into your existing cognitive network. This delicate birth of new brain tissue is highly sensitive. Chronic sleep deprivation acts as a neurotoxic drought, instantly starving these neural stem cells and profoundly crippling your ability to learn, adapt, or heal from emotional trauma. Both the tropical root and the human mind require the absolute sanctuary of the night to generate their replacements. Building the microscopic foundation of tomorrow completely out of sight from the waking world. Securing an unbroken chain of biological continuity that stretches far beyond a single daily cycle. Proving that true resilience requires a deeply protected space where life can quietly begin again. As the night reaches its deepest midpoint, the organism faces its most critical existential threat, the risk of internal starvation. To survive until dawn without the immediate energy of photosynthesis, the Maranta relies on a highly sophisticated molecular fuel gauge. Utilizing a signaling molecule called trehalose 6-phosphate to precisely measure its exact remaining sucrose reserves. This botanical sensor dictates the exact microscopic speed at which the plant is allowed to degrade its stored daytime starch, ensuring the energy supply is metered out flawlessly, mathematically calculated to last exactly until the sun returns. This strict nocturnal energy metering perfectly mirrors the endocrine satiety signals oscillating within your own sleeping body, where, during deep, uninterrupted sleep, your adipose tissue secretes high levels of the hormone leptin, a vital chemical signal that actively suppresses ghrelin, the peptide hormone responsible for triggering acute hunger, locking your metabolism into a stable, fasting state that allows cellular repair to proceed without the massive energy distraction of digestion. When artificial lighting or severe stress fractures your sleep architecture, this delicate endocrine balance instantly collapses. Leptin levels plummet while ghrelin spikes, tricking your brain into a state of perceived starvation, driving systemic insulin resistance and forcing the body to hoard fat against a famine that doesn't actually exist. Just as the Maranta would exhaust its starch reserves and suffer catastrophic cellular death before morning if its internal timer were broken. Both biological systems absolutely depend on the unbroken continuity of the dark to correctly read their own fuel gauges, proving that profound rest is the only mechanism that allows life to accurately measure its own capacity to survive. Stepping back from the microscopic scale, the ultimate purpose of this daily biological suspension becomes fundamentally clear. To exist as a complex organism is to wage a perpetual, exhausting war against thermodynamic entropy. Throughout the waking day, the relentless consumption of energy inherently generates chaos, metabolic heat, and structural degradation. The Maranta uses the absolute stillness of the night as a critical thermodynamic vent, deliberately shutting down kinetic movement to shed this accumulated entropy and return its cellular matrix to a state of perfect order. This botanical heat dissipation precisely mirrors the drop in core body temperature required for you to enter deep sleep, where your brain deliberately slows its metabolic firing rate to the absolute minimum threshold of survival, allowing billions of neurons to physically stabilize, clearing the thermal and chemical noise generated by human consciousness. If this entropic venting is denied by chronic wakefulness, the internal chaos rapidly compounds into structural collapse, manifesting as systemic inflammation, neurodegeneration, and the catastrophic breakdown of the biological machine. Sleep, therefore, is not a luxury, nor a simple absence of action, but the most fundamental law of physical preservation, the mandatory toll exacted by the universe for the privilege of moving, thinking, and existing in the light. Both the tropical rainforest and the human cortex must continually surrender to the dark to scrub the chaos from their code, anchoring themselves in the profound stillness of the night to restore the fragile geometry of life, proving, ultimately, that the brilliant complexity of the waking world is entirely built upon the quiet, invisible architecture of sleep. So the next time you feel the heavy, inescapable pull of exhaustion at the end of a long day, do not view it as a weakness or a failure of your physical endurance. Recognize it instead as an ancient, unbreakable biological imperative calling you home, an invitation to join the Maranta, the deep roots, and the very cosmos in the quiet work of restoration. To fold inward, to close your leaves to the noise of the waking world, and to trust the absolute, uncompromising healing power of the dark. Vast, resonant atmospheric music swells, deep, rhythmic biological pulse echoing through the forest, soft wind moving through the towering canopy, faint, crystalline chimes representing microscopic repair, rich, sweeping strings harmonizing with the ecosystem, the steady, peaceful breathing of a resting world, ascending, hopeful major chord signaling the promise of dawn, the distant, echoing call of a rainforest bird, complete, perfect biological silence.